All right, welcome back to another edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham, and I am joined by an all-star cast of Florida State Seminoles. Jerry Cutts is with us tonight. We got him going on the off week. Kurt Weiler's with us as well, and Mark Salva's back. And the guys, we thought this was going to be a slow off week around last Thursday or Friday, and of course. On Sunday, everything blew up, and Mike Norvell, as everyone knows now, that's listening to this show, unless you're just coming back into the country, fired Adam Fuller, offensive coordinator Alex Atkins, and wide receiver coach Ron Dugan's on Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. And, of course, there's a lot of speculation going around about who they're going to replace those dudes with, and we will talk a little bit about that. We may get joined by Charles Fishbein as he is trying to join us as well. He's got a lot of contacts in the college football world. We're going to get some of Fish's thoughts. But, Jerry, since you were not with us last night and you obviously have spent your life around Florida State and are well connected, my first question to you is, did you know before we did?
I had an indication that they were going to have a meeting on Sunday, but I had no idea that it was going to, happen.
Right.
But I know they'd been meeting after games and that it was imminent. But I was surprised even still when they announced that prior to December 1st. That surprised me.
Yep. Yeah, it did me a little bit too, particularly the coordinators. Like I did not see those coming. But listen, if he was going to make the change, I guess go ahead and make it. And listen, we can talk about this later, but I think maybe one of the reasons he's made the change is I think he's probably got his choices for those two positions down to a very few people. I think, as you said, if they've been meeting, that was the same thing with Willie in 2019. We would hear about these after the game meetings that were taking place, and sooner or later a change was made there too. So I do think this is probably a lot further along than what we think it is. There are a ton of names, but Kurt, I know you were at Mike's press conference today. I really just, as much as anything, and I definitely want to hear what you guys think about what Mike had to say and how you're reading into that. But what was you've been there every week. Mondays have been strange this year with the energy and attitude and intensity or lack thereof in press conferences. And I'm not one I'm not a guy that likes these impassioned rants at press conferences from coaches. It gets tiresome after a while. But what was your take? What was the energy like in that room, and what did you think about what Mike had to say?
I mean, it was most definitely different than I think about the last 8 Mondays had been. I mean, they'd kind of felt like falling into a rhythm a bit with being on a 6-game losing streak of we're not playing up to the standard, disappointed in what we saw Saturday. A lot of the same things, talking about the challenge ahead and things like that, and his optimism about based off practice the night before, things like that. I mean, this was certainly different. I thought it was as good a press conference as Mike Norvell has had in weeks. I saw someone else suggest, and I kind of can't help but wonder. I think he was trying to get to the end of the season, but I wonder if he knew these changes were coming for weeks, and that has kind of been sitting on him. And it happening yesterday was kind of a weight lifted off, a Band-Aid being pulled off, if you will, and kind of just changed his energy. I think it was as impassioned as he'd been. I think he said, a lot of things. I think he said a lot of the right things. I think something that stuck out to me certainly was, he talked a lot about how tough it was and that he likes them as people and he knows they're good coaches, but that he kind of, I think, said like everything hasn't been up to their standard, including them coaching up to their standard. I mean, I think that sums it up. We've seen the coaches these guys can be, but I think it's undeniable this year that those three, and there could be a few others too, but you can't fire everybody in season. I think those 3 you can point to it hasn't been up to the standard.
Yeah, you've got to have somebody that can still help you run a practice and game plan and all those things. And I do think, and I'll get Jerry's input on this as well, but certainly I do think there are more changes coming. That's just what's going to happen when you go 1-9. And I think that I've said it before. This is in any other situation with the finances being different, there's probably everyone's in jeopardy, not just half or 6 or 7 of the assistant coaches. And we know there's not going to be a change at the head coach position this year. And listen, I said this last night. I think I said it last night. There was so much we talked about. But I think part of the timing was I think that I think it looked so bad against North Carolina and against Notre Dame that we heard Mike refer to these guys as brothers. You could tell that he has a appreciation for particularly Adam, who he's worked with for over 7 years now, including their time at Memphis together. I think this is a decision that was made for him. I think the timing was made for him, and I think obviously he could have fought it, but it was not going to do him. That was not going to do him any good in the long run. But these things are usually handled behind closed doors. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, I might disagree with you on that.
Yeah, I disagree too.
Yeah, I think for one thing, Mike. Well, from everything I've talked to people inside those meetings, this was a very mutual decision, and that Norvell Alford didn't want to push him on the decision. He wanted Mike to come to the decision, on his terms, which is what all good ADs do that, because you can win a battle with a head coach and lose the war. So I think Alford. I hope Alford handled it properly, and let Mike believe that it was the right decision. And I think the timing actually had something to do with this off week.
I think that and the new calendar, right? That he mentioned the early National Signing Day being moved up. He mentioned that today. I think that was a factor as well. But go ahead. Yeah,
and I think that I think you can be patient up to a point. I went through the Bowden final years, and we lost 22,000 season ticket holders during that time. People said that TK fired Bobby. No, the season ticket holders fired him. Had the season ticket sales have stayed strong, TK wouldn't have fired him. And really, I think that's when you start seeing problems in a program, first thing the fans want to do is quit buying tickets and withhold their booster contribution, because they know that will cause an AD to take action. And so I think when the problems started happening, and certainly the pressure mounted on Alford, and that pressure comes from a lot of places. And in the case of Alford, I really believe it came from within him, that he could see these problems and knew we had to change it. And the noise from the outside, and I'm talking about everything from message boards all the way up to the president and the chairman of the board and former players who know football, whatever they were saying to Alford was only validating what he already believed. So, and I've checked on that with a couple of people close to the situation, and it was very mutual decision.
I think that speaks volume. I mean, I think that's good. I mean, I think that knowing that those, I said it last night. I'm not just the way the season's played out. I think it made the decision easy. I thought the conversations were probably hard to have, and he backed that up today.
Yeah, I think the decisions were easy in my mind. You have to make a change, and it was obvious where the problems were. Now, in terms of how many more coaches are removed, I kind of think, and Pat, I want your opinion on this, and Mark and Kurt, but I kind of think that's going to depend on who the coordinator is and who the coordinator has that he wants to bring with him, and whether that guy is acceptable to Mike. Because what you got right now is, if you're going to go out and get a certain, let's say your coordinator's a quarterback coach. Well, who's going to be the offensive line coach?
Right.
And if that coordinator's got a rock star offensive line coach who's recruited Florida, That's an easy decision. But if that guy doesn't bring an offensive line coach with him, now you got to say, well, is this offensive line coach going to be a good fit with this offensive coordinator? And if I'm thinking about on the defense, for example, if a guy wants to bring a defensive line coach and you want to keep Odell on staff, it's not going to be a real good conversation. And if you like his defensive line coach he wants to bring and you think that's the right deal, then you got to be willing to have that conversation with Odell. And I'm using a dramatic example on purpose.
Right. Well, I mean, he's the second most popular person in the history of Florida State football outside of Bobby Bowden.
Without question. And I think even the most cynical of our fans want Odell to go on his terms.
Right.
But I think Odell has been adaptable to a lot of different styles. It's just, I'm going to use the offensive coordinator example. If he wants to bring in a different staff, he's got a wide receiver coach. Great. Does he have an offensive line coach? Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. I'm sure Mike will want to interview those guys and look at their backgrounds. Are they good with players? Are they good recruiters? Are they good citizens? Do they fit the culture of Florida State?
I think some of that.
Now, I want to ask this as a question to you guys. I've stated a premise. What do you think? I mean, don't you think? Let me back up one last thing. I want to say one more thing. I went back and thought about Coach Bowden's hires when a coordinator left. The coordinator he brought in didn't bring many people with him until Jimbo. And even then, Jimbo came in pretty much alone. I think he brought an offensive line coach with him. But when Mickey came and took over as defensive coordinator, I think the only guy he brought with him that first year was your dad. Wally was the only guy he brought, wasn't he?
He brought Dad in the year after 85. Mickey came in 84 when they were out at Arizona Wranglers together, and then when the league folded, Dad came to Florida.
So when Mickey came in, he inherited Gladden, Amato, McDowell. So he didn't bring anybody.
Yeah.
No.
When Henshaw left and they brought in Art Baker, he didn't bring anybody. When he left and they brought in McDuffie, he didn't bring anybody.
A lot of those times were only one opening, right? I guess that's kind of the difference between a lot of those. Was there ever a year of mass staff exodus under Bobby?
but no. Well, only when like Mark and Wally
Brad.
went. Brad and Wally and Mark and John
Eason.
Yeah.
That year, and then when Amato left, he took a couple guys with him, but it wasn't a mass exodus. No, the biggest one was when Brad left.
Yeah, I think
he took Van Hallinger.
That's right. He did take Van Hallinger. That's right.
And of course, Salva. Yeah. Salva was a huge loss.
Don't let the door hit my butt on the way out, right?
The bricklaying at the stadium became a lot slower after Mark left.
That's exactly right.
That's right.
But to answer your question, Jerry, I think on offense, I think a couple of things will factor into that. A, does Mike hold on to his own play calling, and then it's not as critical and important that he has an offensive coordinator as his own offensive line coach. And I think if he does turn the offense over to somebody else, then it becomes very important that he allows him to try to bring in who he would like to bring in. And then on the defensive side of things, listen, I think, is it going to change something schematically? Does it, you and I have talked about, we'd like to see a more aggressive defensive front approach to playing defense, and does he change systems? Does Odell want to go back to coaching that way? So I think there's what systems have these? Is JPP going to be is JP going to be a guy that the coordinator can work with, and is Randy Shannon and so forth and so on. And listen, we don't know that he's made decisions on some of these guys yet either, right? I mean, they may not have the option of coming back, but I think if Mike wants a guy bad enough, he's going to have to concede to some things to him on either offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. But I think on the offensive side of the ball, it has much more to do with who is actually running the offense as far as the play calling is concerned. Mark,
let me tell you. So when I watched that press conference, I had a couple of thoughts. Number one, he looked like Kurt said, he had a weight taken off of him. He looked much lighter, and his tone of his voice and his pace of his speech and all that stuff was noticeably different. And the other thing I took out of that was that, there's more changes coming and that everything's on the table, and I think that includes support staff and players. I bet there's some players that are going to be asked to move on. I mean, that's kind of, I kind of got that undertone a little bit of, what we are looking at everything. And the other thing that's really obvious to me is that he definitely has a picture of what he wants it to look like moving forward. And he was almost giddy talking about that part of it, that I have a picture of what it looks like. I'm having conversations with people. I would be surprised if he's much further along than we think on this deal. And that's kind of the impression I got, because like I said, he was almost giddy, measured, but you can tell he's a little bit excited about what this could look like if all the pieces fall into place. So I think he has a really good idea of what he wants. And I think there's probably conversations happening with agents already,
Yep.
And it's just a matter of what's the situation with, the situations that these other coaches are in. Where are their teams, and where are they going to a bowl? Are they going to a playoff? Are they in the NFL? I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's all kinds of things. I was thinking too.
He hinted at that, Mark.
Yeah. So
there's an NFL hint today.
Yeah, which makes sense to me, because you have somebody that's ambitious in the NFL. There's only 32 head coaching jobs and coordinator jobs. If you're an assistant in the NFL, and you can come to a major school like Florida State, turn it around, make it look really good. I mean, who was the coordinator at LSU when Burrow was there? Brady, right?
Yeah, he's at the Bills now.
Yeah, you get a guy like Brady, to come in and really do something. You elevate your profile, you make a good paycheck too, because I mean, let's face it, Florida State is still a greatly recognized brand, and what are we, Jerry? We're top 10 paying assistants, I would think, somewhere in there, right? Yeah. So I think that would be really really attractive to an NFL assistant who's looking to elevate his profile. So yeah, there's all kinds of options, but again, from that press conference, it seemed to me that he has a pretty good idea of what he wants, what it's going to look like, and I think he's further along in the process than we think.
I agree with that, Mark. Kurt?
You talked about the playoff of it all, and the problem this year with that is there are far more teams still in the playoff hunt because it's a 12-team playoff now. I mean, there are plenty of, as great a story as Indiana is, I don't think we think that an Indiana would be in a 12-team playoff hunt or in a 14 playoff hunt, but they're very much, I mean, they probably have to lose both their last two games to not be in the 12-team playoff. And so, and I know that's a place that has a few candidates that you could be looking at. There are plenty of other teams on that list. So I think he talked about today pretty interesting. I know he kind of got asked about, with the season ending November 30th and with the signing period being near less than a week after, it's the Wednesday through Friday after the season ends, how much of a rush is it to get those coaches in by then? And he kind of said it would be great, but we know how the world works. We know how the calendar is now. It's more important to find the right guy than to have a guy then. Because I think the truth of the matter is a lot of the hay is in the barn with that 2024 class or 2025 class, the one that's wrapping up in a few weeks. I don't know. I wonder how much of a difference having those things all lined up would even make for how Florida State closes with this class.
Yeah, because I think it's more about retaining the 13 kids you got and maybe adding a couple more with these late visits they're going to have the week of the Charleston Southern game and the week of the Florida game. I think it's more right now, if I think the biggest concern you got on the recruiting front is holding on to those 4 offensive linemen. Because obviously, if you watch their reaction, they do have great relationships with Alex. And listen, kids are resilient; they'll get past this. They always do. And when they name the new offensive line coach, he's going to say, he should be able to say all the right things about what he's going to do and who he's developed, because we think it will be a proven guy. Now, what that means, whether it's proven at the NFL level, major college level, group of 5 level, I think that's the big part of the recruiting thing is how does it affect the offensive lineman? You think you didn't have a receiver committed to this class, so you're awash there. Although Boggs, Javon Boggs, who they brought in for an official visit last or week before, said he was surprised because all of his recruiting communication had come from Atkins and Dugans, but also that he understood this was a business. And listen, these prospects do understand more so than any other generation of prospects that this is a business, because they are constantly negotiating as opposed to being recruited. So I think that helps Florida State as retaining those guys, is that this is turned into a professional business. So and those kids are you might lose 1 or 2, but I think they certainly have their work cut out for them to keep them.
But in a way, it's almost better to make the move now and not have him find out the Sunday, like 3 days before he's making the decision. Now you have 2 weeks to lay it out, or 3 weeks to lay it out.
And there's no knee-jerk reaction on December 2nd. I'm decommitting and I'm signing.
I got to say,
today.
I've seen this happen for 30 years where they hide the firing of a coach until after signing day, which I just think is bullshit. I think that's just so dishonest.
It's such a bad way to start a relationship.
It really is. And now with the portal, that kid can decommit immediately. And but anyway, welcome, Fish. Good to see you, buddy.
Fish, how was your trip? How was your trip to the market?
Oh man, I'm always running guns. So
You
forgiving me for last night when we got in our little spat?
I don't remember, man. Listen,
I had a subscriber call me and tell me they loved it. They loved that.
Jerry will tell you, man, like being married, you have spats all the time. If I held grudges, I'd never talk to my wife again. So, I don't even remember what happened yesterday, to be honest.
Jerry, you had a subscriber do what now?
He called me today. We were talking, and he said, "Yeah, Pat and Fish got into it pretty good last night." And he said, "I love it when they're like an old married couple."
It was our first take moment.
I'll kiss Pat on the lips.
Easy, buddy. Easy, buddy. I know things are moving fast, but they're not moving that fast. Relax. So, Fish, what are you hearing? I mean, did you watch the press conference today? And
I didn't get a chance to, like I've said, Mike has grown on me. You guys know my feelings originally. I wasn't a big fan of him being hired, and it had nothing to do with him personally. I thought the connections to recruiting, me and Jerry discussed this, that I thought it was very important. But he's grown on me, and I put a lot of stock in what he did the last 2 years. I know other people think I'm an idiot for saying that. And this needed to be done last year, but it's very difficult when you're 13-0 to tell somebody, hey, you're doing something wrong. So, yeah, they probably should have hired new coaches last year. And this idea, I've said this, I've had coaches calling me all day, hey, Fish, can you get me in with Coach Norvell? So this idea that nobody wants to coach here, I think we could just put that to rest. There's plenty of guys that would love to coach at Florida State. And some of them are some pretty big names. So I think Mike's going to do his due diligence, and they're going to find good coaches and candidates. And hey, this is part of college football now. It's kind of like Christmas every year. You never know what you're going to get.
All right. Well, let me ask you this question, Fish, because we were just talking about it before you jumped on. Mark and I both believe, I think because he made the decision when he did, he's further along in the search than what we're thinking, that this is not just something he's putting together right now. And Mark believes, based off what he said today, that he's got some people identified. I think it's probably down to 1 or 2 people on both sides of the ball at coordinator. What are your thoughts? Do you think he's got it pared down to a couple of names?
I think you're giving these guys too much credit. I don't.
Hold on, you just came on here bragging about how you love the guy. Now you're calling him.
But I don't like. I think these coaches.
Here they go.
I think but I think Jerry will agree with this. I think these coaches always have that Rolodex of guys that they'll probably pull from. But I think Mike honestly probably thought to the last two weeks, maybe 3 weeks, that this thing can still turn around. I mean, I just think coaches think differently. They're trying to win. They're trying to get this thing turned around. He was probably hoping that it would turn around, and then eventually 52-3 happens, and you're like, all right, man, I this isn't going to work. So
I disagree. I think he's known that this day was coming, especially for these 2 or 3 guys, for a little bit, at least since Miami. Well, look, I saw somebody sent me a clip of that Jordan Travis play against Florida 2 years ago when he dodged 5 guys and almost scored that touchdown. Remember, his knee hit right at the end. It's like, you know what? They've been bad for a long time, but this guy just covered it up a lot. Because they did. They just ran through the steps, just like it looked just like it did this week in the last couple of weeks.
I mean,
so it's been that way for a while.
But I'll tell you this. I will tell you this, Mark. I heard about coaches changes about 2-3 weeks ago that this was going to happen. But I can tell you though, there were some issues with Alex, whether they were going to let him go. He was the one guy that one of my sources was not sure on because of the sanctions that he had against him. So there was some doubt that he would be. I was told Fuller was definitely gone. I was told that Dugans was definitely gone. There was a couple other guys, and I don't want to mention by name because they're still on the staff. But Atkins was the one guy that was safe, I think, until this last game. I think it finally put him over the edge that, hey, this isn't going to work. But he was the one guy that I was told by my source that he wasn't 100% sure that Atkins was gone because of the show cause.
Well, that's why, and that was one of the reasons I said I think maybe there was a little nudge to help him get that done. I mean, that's all I meant when I said that earlier, that there were some of these decisions were made by people that we do not even share the same income tax bracket with, and
right.
So I think there's people that have power and influence, and I think in a situation like that, those people are going to win the day. But yeah, I think that listen, I've had conversations with Alex for the last 4 years. He seems like a great guy off the field, but there's no way with all the fire that was around this program and going 1-9 that you could bring him back, given what the optics of how the offensive line was playing, where they were, and historically the worst offense FSU has had. And shit, I don't know what.
It's the worst offense in Power 4 football.
Yeah,
it's
the worst
scoring offense in FBS football.
Yeah. So he didn't really have a choice, I don't think. I mean, that was always going to happen, but he might have got some help. But
I will say, to Fish's point, Fish, you didn't watch today, but you hit on a point that Mike talked about. Mike, you talked about the Rolodex of names. I mean, Mike said today that he has, since he was a coordinator before he's a head coach, a running list of guys he's worked with, guys he's met, guys who he's just watched their teams and said, that's a guy where if a position comes open, I would maybe be interested in talking to him to potentially hire him. I think he talked about, he hasn't really had a moment in his head coaching career of getting rid of or having openings because of firings more. It's more been guys getting promoted, but I think that is something that a lot of coaches have, and Mike admitted to having today.
Listen, a lot of these guys are going to look at coaches that they coached against that had success against them. You saw with Jimbo, with Mike Elko. Elko always had success against Jimbo, and when Jimbo he wanted Elko at Florida State. That I had spoken to Jimbo. He really liked Elko a lot, going back to playing against him at Wake Forest, and that was one of the guys he wanted to bring in at Florida State. So when he got the job at Texas A&M, that was one of the first guys on his list. So he had a list of guys that he remembered coaching against. So that's common in this business.
Yeah. The one thing I think people need to, I see it on the boards already. It's, we want the coordinator from Oregon, and we want the defensive coordinator from Georgia, and we want we want, Monty Kiffin. I mean, it's just
Monty Kiffin's dead. So
yes, I know it was hyperbole. Fish. It was hyperbole. All right, so
he may be better at this point than Adam Fuller. So I mean, that's always a possibility.
no.
Wow.
Oh,
Come
man.
on. Okay.
I appreciated the person on our board today who said it might take Buddy Ryan to appease.
I can say that because he's never going to buy my service at Tusculum, so I ain't worried about it.
Oh, wow.
Oh, dude.
Wow. Wow.
Fish didn't even wait for the body to be buried.
Dude.
Yes. I mean, Lord have mercy. All right. Fish, you got anybody else you want to throw under the bus right now?
No, I like all the other coaches, even the ones that got let go. But
all right, well,
that's an interesting. I was going to say that's an interesting point. There wasn't anything dislikable about any three of these coaches.
Yeah. I mean, very personable. I mean, Dugas was kind of quiet, but Alex would talk to you, and I had some interaction with him during the season. And Adam is kind of a unique personality, and he was always a guy that would come out and say hello to you when you're sitting out on the bench waiting for recruits to come out, and he'd engage in conversation.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No,
so there's just nothing personal in that.
No, listen.
There's two types of coaches, right? There's those that have been fired and those that are going to get fired.
That's right.
I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, there's no surprises in this business. When you're a coach at this level, you produce results, or you're on the hook, and that's everybody knows that going in, and that's why they get paid so much.
Hey, I've seen Dugan. I've known Dugan since he was at USF, and then Miami. Like, he's always been great to me. Dugan's always been very polite. Always enjoyed talking football with him. He was always approachable. Atkins, I met. He had just gotten. I went to the coaching convention that year, and Norvell had just gotten the job, and he had just come over from Charlotte, and he was very personable. I think he got a little distance this last year or so. I thought there was a change in his personality, but who knows? These guys have so much.
He's got a new child.
Yeah,
he's got his first child.
Yeah, so I mean,
you also wonder the show cause. Does that create a little bitterness?
But Adam's from the Northeast, and I just think sometimes if you're from Boston or New York and you're not used to that, I think those kind of personalities, if you don't get a person from the Northeast, they could rub you the wrong way. I don't think it's just that's how those people are from up north. I'm not knocking them, but it's a different personality. If you're not, I'm from New Jersey. Everybody knows I'm an asshole, so it's all right, man. So. Right, Jerry? Right?
They do now.
Jerry, you have the right to say it now, man. I got you on record.
I'm staying quiet.
Fish, where did you go?
I've given you every chance.
You live in the Northeast, dude. You're in Miami.
Yes, you
do. Exactly. Well, my family's from New Jersey and New York, so what do you expect, man?
Well, why aren't you? I thought you'd be better friends with Adam then. I mean, you're like brothers.
Listen, he's just awkward, man. That's it, man.
All right.
Well, hold up. This is a really good point at this point to say this. There are cultural differences, and when you're relating to kids, and Mark, you coached kids. You got to relate to the players. The players have got to connect with you. And I think culture matters.
Yep.
Well, credibility, right? Who are you? Where'd you come from? Where's that common bond? A kid from South Florida, how's he going to relate to a guy from the Northeast? So they didn't grow up in the same place. They don't, their experiences growing up are totally different. The football is different. The language is different, right? Yeah. I mean, when you're trying to relate to kids, you're trying to find common ground. I mean, how many times Coach Bowden go into somebody's house and start weaving stories about growing up in the South and with the mamas and all that stuff. Oh yeah, that banana pudding's just like my grandmother's. You know what I mean? I mean, stuff like that. Those things matter. Building relationships and building bonds with players, and so it's not something to be taken lightly. And trust. Yeah.
And listen, Florida kid. I've always said it, and my brother, who's spent 25 years in Florida kids are different too.
Yeah, and they can adjust. They can adjust differently. Listen, I always go back. I met Al Golden when he first got. He had gotten the job at Miami, and they introduced Coley and Mario had introduced me to him. I got along with him, and I think you see him at Notre Dame now. That's the right fit. He was odd at Miami. He just was an odd fit. Like I got along with him. He was very personable. I'm like, man, this guy's a smart guy. He won at Temple. He always I think he would do great as a head coach at Virginia or Boston College, but he was a wrong fit at Miami. He wore his tie. He was up like it just didn't work with the kids at Miami. I think Adams kind of that same type of coach that if you put him at a Northeast school or a Midwest school, he probably would fit in a lot better. And I think it was awkward for recruits that got to meet him. I know that personally because I heard the stories. I just think it was a wrong fit. Square peg, wrong hole, circle hole. It's just a wrong fit, whatever the saying is. So,
yeah. Good job, Fish.
What I will say, though, for Adam Fuller, through that, I don't disagree with a lot of what's been said. I think you saw last year how much those players loved him. Like when things are going well, I think you saw in practice, we saw as around the program a lot. I think we saw how much those defensive players really liked playing for him.
I will say this. I think that I do think that Adam was a different dude. And I do think when you're winning, the personality differences, you look, they get
maybe so.
Yeah, but I listen. I don't necessarily agree that it was they loved playing for him. I think they loved last year's team was special. They loved playing for each other, something we have not seen this year. Because I've heard different things, and I think that when you're winning, kids will listen to everything you say, regardless of what they think. I think when you start losing, the relationships,
locker room attorneys take over.
Yeah, the relationships have to be real.
I think players genuinely all loved Mickey. I think even though he was hard on them, it's a different. Like Mickey always had the respect to the players. I think, like I said, I disagree a little bit about they were in love with Adam. I mean, I heard some stories and I kind of blew them off, but they were there. So.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Verse and Fisk were both Yankees, so there you go.
Exactly.
And they're really damn good Yankees too.
Yeah.
They're both having a hell of a year in LA. They play tonight, as a matter of fact. So it'll be fun to watch those guys tonight play. They're both having. All right, so I guess maybe to steer this conversation away from the guys that are not here anymore, which we can talk more about, but let's talk a little bit about the defensive coordinator hot board that we put up online tonight. As I said, a lot of times the first names are going to not be the names that end up getting the job. You see it almost across the board, whether it's a head coaching job, a coordinator's job, and there's between the 4 or 5 of the sites that cover this program, I guarantee you there's 40 defensive coordinator names. Somebody's going to pin the coach on the whatever, pin the tail on the coach.
Pin the call sheet on the coordinator.
Yeah. So, but let's talk about some of the guys that you guys wrote about today, Kurt. And I know Fish was heavily involved in helping create this list. I gave a couple of names, and I saw one of the early comments from one of our subscribers saying that he was not overly impressed. All right, I think fans always feel comforted when they get a known commodity, a known name, and just because we may not understand, it may not be Will Muschamp, and it may not be Tyler Santucci or somebody like that. It may not be Charlie Partridge, guys that have
Bob Stoops. Any chance of Bob Stoops?
No, I did hear he was at an Italian restaurant.
That's a great example.
I heard he just ordered some chicken marinara over there.
Is it Charlie Partridge or Chris Partridge? Because I still think Charlie's in play.
Well, the Partridge family.
Yeah.
So Susan Day's in play.
So we're going to get Shane Burnham or Pat Burnham?
Yeah, that's right. All the families in play. And we'll sing, too. We're not very good at it, but we'll sing. But listen, so let's talk about some of the names, guys. Fish, I'm going to start with you because obviously between the 5 of us, you are the most well-connected when it comes to assistant coaches across this country because of your scouting service, which you have done obviously very successfully for the last 25 years. Who are the names that you are hearing on the defensive side of things?
Well, I mean, you put up one of the names, Aaron Henry. I think, he's a Florida born and bred Florida guy, went to Immokalee High School. I actually remember when he was getting recruited out of Immokalee. He's a great guy. That's first thing first. He's really, really, I think Florida kids will enjoy playing for him if he did come to Florida State. Very relatable. Like I said, he's everything. All the boxes are checked off on what you want in a coordinator and somebody that can recruit. Man, somebody's got a dog barking.
Sorry, it's not mine tonight. Thank God.
Herb Street doesn't have the corner on Golden Retrievers. Go ahead.
All right, but I think he's one of them. You guys put Derek Nicholson up. I remember when Derek was getting recruited. He comes from a great family. I liked his mom and dad. He's done a very good job at Miami. He's not, even though he's co-D coordinator, Guidry kind of calls the defense there. He's borderline elite recruiter. I mean, he's getting to that point where he's one of the top recruiters for his positional group. And I think that's very important. I'd give up a little bit of the coaching side for somebody that can go out and get players. I've said this over and over, talent acquisition. Florida State had guys that could coach. They need guys that can recruit. If they bring in a D coordinator, there's positional coaches they could bring in to help that guy out. The one guy I brought up, and I talked to you guys about it, and Jerry, it seemed like he kind of agreed. If the Purdue head coach goes and gets let go, he'd be my number one guy. I really think Mike needs somebody that he basically can hand one side of the ball over, take some of those responsibilities away from Mike, kind of a head coach or assistant head coach of that side of the ball, and he could just focus on the offense. He has so many other things to worry about. You bring in somebody like Walters, who has been a head coach, whether he was successful or not. He understands what it takes during the week to get a team prepared, all the things as far as practice and preparation for game day. He would bring a lot to the table. You look at what he did at Illinois. He was one of the top 3 or 4 D coordinators that year in the country. Number one in interceptions. I think we can all agree. Number one in takeaways. If they brought this guy in, they'd actually have mission takeaway. They may actually fulfill that promise with only 3. That's the biggest thing. I think they need an aggressive coach that puts a lot of pressure on the opposing offenses. And the one thing at Florida State that's always mattered, and you even go look at the years they struggled, the final few years of Bobby, the one thing that they always had a chance to win games because the defense made plays, gave yourself a chance. Even when the offense struggled, if you have an elite level defense, you have a shot in any game to win. Even these days, I'd like to see Florida State to get back to that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion between whether you need to be a great recruiter or a great coach, particularly where we are in the NIL era, because I think we're in the pond that Florida State wants to fish in. I'm not sure how much I think it's turning more and more about the business and not less and less about the recruiting. In fact, I've said many times over the last several weeks, this is less about recruiting and more about negotiation, particularly at the top levels of college football. I think it's more about
then maybe you shouldn't hire coaches. You should just hire guys that are good at handing out money. I don't know.
There we go again.
My point was, Fish, that I think maybe you err towards the side of being a great on-the-field coach over recruiting in the NIL era. I think it's about evaluation and coaching as much as it is about recruiting. But if you win at Florida State, you're going to get recruits.
Let me jump in a second on that. I think that's particularly true with a defensive coordinator and an offensive coordinator. All right? Position coaches better be able to recruit. They need to be – I'd side on the recruiting side between a wide receiver coach.
Yeah.
But if you look at – and I don't mean any disrespect to Mickey Andrews when I say this, but that's not what his strength was. You know? If you look at Mickey's territory and the number of players he brought in out of his territory, you know, what Mickey's strength was
Derek Brooks wasn't
coaching
bad.
him up on game day. Huh?
Derek Brooks wasn't bad.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, Mark.
Yeah,
but you know, over a long period of time, and I preface this by saying no disrespect, but he wasn't hired to be a great recruiter. He was recruited.
But Jerry, the way it was structured for the coordinators had those local areas in the closer to Tallahassee areas, because you know during recruiting periods during the season they wouldn't go recruiting, you know, and that was the guys that didn't have as big of that had the bigger, more remote recruiting areas were guys that could stand to not be Friday night with the team and fly in on Saturday morning. So that was why. Sorry.
Yeah, because Mickey could go to a game in the Big Bend or Pensacola and be back at the team hotel. Or he could go to schools on Thursday and Friday, and
look at your offensive coordinators.
But it also goes hand in hand. If you can't recruit, I guarantee you, most likely that coach ain't a good coach. I mean, it's just you have to be a good recruiter. You got to be able. One, I get you have money and you need money and money and money, and that's all it is. But you know what?
Why can't you hire guys that can do both? Why does it have to be one?
Because there's very few that do both really well.
Yeah,
that's nice.
They don't stay coordinators long.
You know what? Those guys move up and they get paid a lot of money. And there's very few of those guys. I've been in this business a long time. I'm telling you, I could tell the great recruiters are like great football players. They stand out. You see them. There's a guy, Todd Hartley at Georgia. He's an oddball, but the guy shows up in a Charger and the thing's orange, and like the guy just has it. I don't know what it is, but the guy has it. And then there's some guys that I meet and they couldn't recruit. Honestly, they could have all the money in the world. They could have Ohio State money and what they're giving kids, and I'm telling you, they won't land a damn soul. It matters. You still got to be able to recruit. There's some guys that are really, really good at it.
And the other thing it does is it gives you a discount. Right, your NIL dollar goes a lot longer way if the kid's willing to take a little bit less to go to a school that he's been sold on, that he likes, that he has a relationship with the staff.
To hear people in KJ Bolden's camp say, to use an example, he took less money, he left money on the table to go to Georgia. He could have gotten more money elsewhere, be that at Florida State or be that at Auburn. I'm sure there are plenty of other examples. I think the thing is, Mike shouldn't totally overcorrect the other way and go full recruiting guys who aren't as good as coaches. But I think when you look at, you can't ignore the fact that even with the money Florida State's had the last few years, Mike has not been put together, and Florida State has not been put together stellar recruiting classes. And that's part of why they're in the situation they're in. They haven't been in the top 10. They haven't really even sniffed the top 10 in some years. And there were some reasons why that took time with the pandemic, with having to build those Florida ties. But Mike has now built those Florida ties. I think he needs to assemble a group of guys around him who can handle the talent acquisition part and who have those Florida ties.
But let me ask Jerry this. Jerry, how would a young Chuck Amato with the NIL have done in this era? Somebody with that personality that had the connections he had, I'd feel pretty good with him going into somebody's house knowing that he's bankrolled with a nice amount of money. Or you look at a Doc Holliday, these guys that, let's be honest, don't tell me you guys did get paid back then, but if you gave these guys that had that personality and you gave them a bankroll, heck, man, I'd put my money that they.
Well, let's not talk about Chuck Amato and recruiting. Let me just.
I'm saying as a young. I'm just saying.
Let's say Brad Scott. Or Ronnie Cottrell.
All right.
They'd have tore it up.
Yeah.
Because they were salesmen.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And. But other coaches, like I think Chuck and Mark, you were there when Chuck was there, so I'm going to listen to you on this. But Chuck was a big evaluation guy, and it was hard. Chuck wasn't. I don't think Chuck would have thrown much money around at a kid that he didn't think could play.
No, you talk about the great recruiters that we know, guys you just mentioned, it matters to be first, right? A lot of these guys would identify these kids at a really young age and get in on them, and they would have everything that you needed to influence that kid. They would know who's talking to that kid, every person in the neighborhood that had influence on that kid, where the daddy worked, all that stuff, right? It stuff that takes a lot of work, but it also takes a lot of personality, being able to talk to people, being able to sell, and then framing the program in a way that appealed to that kid, because that's what you're going for, right? You're looking for information. What's important to the kid? What is he looking to do? What are his goals? And that's the kind of thing that good recruiters do. And it's not just coming up and being a youngster. It's the work that goes in between it, right?
Yes.
And then you supplement that with NIL, and now you've really got something. If you just go in there and say, don't put any of that work in, and say, hey, I'll pay you $100,000 more than this school will. Number one, do you want that kid? Number two, you haven't done anything to earn that kid's trust, and you're in danger of getting outbid. Now the next school comes in, and then all of a sudden you're in a bidding, right?
Hey, Mark, let me jump in here on that. You're in sales now.
Yeah.
Before I started the Osceola, I sold computers. We've both been through sales training, right?
Yeah.
What it comes down to, and Billy Sexton, who was a hell of a recruiter and a good evaluator, Billy had been an IBM salesman. He had been through IBM sales training school. And Billy had a book that had everything about the prospect, just like he was selling computers. He had all the prospect data. And he worked a calendar,
Yeah.
Jim Gladden was a hell of a recruiter. If you want to talk about good recruiters in the past, Bob Harbison, right? Deion Sanders, he got in on him early. I mean, Florida State and Georgia were the only two schools ever offered.
People buy and recruits come if they know, like, and trust you.
Right.
Those are the three must: know, like, and trust. And you get that point, again, your NIL dollar will go a lot further.
Absolutely.
And you can spread it out more and get more players.
To Kurt's point about Bolden eventually choosing Georgia over schools that offered him more money.
Right.
You better have guys that can do both. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Between your staff, and listen, I've worked with lots of guys. Maybe it doesn't apply to coordinators, Fish, but I've worked with lots of guys that can do both. It's been over 10
But
years.
Pat, hey, listen, I hear you.
I
hear you.
And say he's got to hire a staff of recruiters.
I'm not saying he has to hire a staff of recruiters, but he just had a bunch of coaches that supposedly were great coaches, and we saw how that worked out. So, I mean, I get it. The coaching's important, but Jimbo's first staff was predominantly recruiters.
Yeah.
That's why they won the national championship.
I'll also say this.
Okay,
go ahead, Kurt.
I think these are somewhat connected. I think we've talked about the staff could stand to be a little younger, and that I think ties into the quote-unquote recruiters, if you will. And two of the guys Fish talked about, I looked it up. Ryan Walters is 38, Aaron Henry's 35. That, I think, fits that bill. And that is a way where maybe without getting a full-on recruiter, because those guys have both proven they can coach, I think the age gap can play a role there.
Well, you say that because you're 34.
I'm 34. Yeah, it is. That's not why I say
Jerry, I seen you coach. You're still pretty good at it, man. Age don't matter.
Well, listen, I think, as you say, well, Fish, who is the best recruiter out of the list of names that you
that's what I want to hear.
Of the coordinators, which, listen, we're getting a lot of Muschamp for DC.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think Muschamp's coached as a D coordinator in the last 10 years. So, I think that, I mean, he hasn't been really he's been out of the loop for a while. And listen, you always get worried that, not that games passed him by, but, defense with the spread defenses, offenses and everything and what they do.
He came off the field last year because he was co-defensive coordinator or secondary coach, wherever he was doing for Georgia. He came off the field last year voluntarily because his son is playing college football, and his new job description, he gets to go watch his son play on Saturdays. So I don't think he's coming out of semi-retirement.
And he's really good friends with Kirby. He's got a good setup. I don't see that happen, but I really think Walters would be, like I said, he'd be my number one choice. He's young. He's recruited well. I know he recruited a kid that went to Dwyer High School. That McKinley Roll was the head coach there.
Yeah.
The kid's now like an All-American this year, so he has a good eye for talent. He seems very personable. The times I've met him, I've spoken to him on the phone. I think he's a guy that would fit in at Florida State. I think he would do very well. He'd be my number one choice. And like I said, the fact that I think that he's been a head coach, that basically I think that's a huge thing. If you could get somebody that has that prior head coaching experience, even like a Tom Allen. Tom Allen would be a great fit, I think, at Florida State. I did a podcast with Tom Allen. I didn't know what his personality was like.
He's got a great personality.
Dude, that guy literally will get you you want to run through a wall. Like, honestly, you're
like row the boat.
No, hey, I love PJ, man. Hey, you know what? The way Pat is, he'd take PJ right now, because I know one thing: PJ can recruit at an elite level.
Who?
So PJ can recruit at an elite level.
I'd sink that boat.
Yeah.
Row the boat.
Let me tell this one story about the importance of getting great players. So when I left FSU and went to South Carolina, I went to a staff of guys that didn't come from programs, like FSU. They came from good places, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, places like that. And we're talking, and we had just done the Charlie Ward offense. We just won the championship. And I'm drawing up plays. They're like, hey, help explain this offense to me. Let's talk about this offense. And I'm drawing plays on the board. And I'm like, okay, we do this. Then you take the tailback and you do this and this. And the guy looks at me and goes, you can't do that. I'm like, well, we did it. Because, yeah, that guy's work done. If we do that with so-and-so, that'll never work. And the same thing on the defensive side of the ball. You run that play. That's great if you're having Amp Lee or Charlie Ward at the quarterback. But most people can't do that, And so
like number 9.
I had zero credibility for the things I was drawing up, the plays, which were very sound. But when you have great players, are those X's and O's, people just kind of laugh. They just started laughing at me. Like, okay, you can do that if you're got those guys.
Right?
I think that's the essence of the 2024 problem.
Oh, no question.
Mike's play calling, it doesn't work with this talent.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I said that all along with Fuller's defense. I said that all along with Fuller's defense. There's nothing wrong with Fuller's scheme. Lots of people run it. But the things that happens is you get isolated a lot of one-on-one tackles, in the open field, and because of the way they run it, and we're a terribly tackling team, and not going to have the talent to close the space, right?
So you're saying you have a problem with number 9 covering a tight end down the field, like
right? If that's Derrick Brooks, that's a great scheme.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and that's my point. Recruiting is important. If you're smart, you spread it out, right? If you're smart, you spread. Remember Jimmy Higgins? Jimmy Higgins, when I was playing, he was the nose guard coach, right? He was one of the 9. He was the nose guard coach, but he was on the road every week from Thursday until he came back for the game on Saturday. Yeah. He was a designated recruiter, But then you had Mickey, who recruited just the panhandle, and that's all he recruited, right?
South Alabama,
in South Alabama. So
you got him a son-in-law out of it. Mickey recruited him a son-in-law.
Yeah, sure did. So
that's right. You got Stolly out of the panhandle.
I think what we're all saying the same thing, and Pat's right too. You got to have sound coaches, right? But if you spread it out, and Jerry said it, there might be a position here or there where I'll take the recruiting over the quote unquote coaching. And look, coaching's not that hard. You can do. I think, I've always been of this opinion. You can run anything as long as it's sound and you run it really, really well and you execute. But if the players are better than your players, you're going to win. It doesn't matter what scheme you run. It doesn't matter what plays you run. It matters if you can execute it. If it's sound, it also matters who the heck's running it.
Yeah. But it's a lot easier to run a defensive scheme when you have Derwin James back there compared to somebody else. The players, I'm a big proponent. I've always have been. I think coaches are important. I think I'm a big proponent of the talent. Just keep loading the roster with talent. It's a lot harder to coach bad players than it is good ones, man. I'm just.
Oh.
Well, there's no doubt about that. No one's arguing that. I think we were just talking about the balance between coach. I mean,
and right now we're talking about coordinators.
Yeah. Yep. Well, coordinators, I want to be able to draw up a system and implement the system and get. So I'd rather have my coordinator. It's a great X and O guy over a recruiter, and then you can have a couple great recruiters on each side of the ball and a couple guys.
That's all we're saying.
Yeah.
Should we talk some overseas?
balance, complementary coaching, just
complementary staff.
That's right. There we go. What'd you say, Kurt?
I said, should we talk some OCs? Should we talk DC?
Yeah, because we got a question on OC, and this is right down Fish's alley. They want to know. Marvin wants to know: is there any chance that the UNLV OC interviews at Florida State for the vacant offensive coordinator job?
I wouldn't be surprised if he already has interviewed. Listen, like I said, I would know nothing about Brennan Marion, but Mike Norvell introduced me to him at the coaching convention this year. They sat and talked football for at least 45 minutes in the Opryland, and I mean, it was like they knew each other. They basically, one would say something. They were so in tune.
A bromance.
And
they do know each other.
I was like, and I don't think that's coincidence. I just think it's one of those things. And he said, Fish, this is a guy you need to know. This is one of the top young offensive coordinators in the country. You need to know him. Coach Marion, you need to know Fish if you're going to recruit the state of Florida. He introduced me. I was like, man, this guy seems like he should be at FSU on the staff the way Norvell was treating him. So it wouldn't be surprising to me.
So what you're saying, Fish, is that we're going to go from the no-no offense to the go-go offense.
Listen, if they could score more than 7 points a game, it is going to be a go-go offense, man.
I'll go for more than 3 at this point.
Yeah. I mean, heck, I never thought we'd become Iowa the last 5 years. But, hey, listen.
Hey, but we might have had a better punter than Iowa.
Yeah, that's good, man. You never want your punter to be the best player on the team. That's not a good sign.
He might not have been. Fitzgerald's pretty good. Yeah. He's pretty good. So, you got some competition there, buddy.
The OC search means more and is truly probably more wide open, though. If, like Mike said today, that he is open to bringing someone in to run their own offense. Brendan Marion he has the go-go offense. I think it's interesting. He's coached quarterbacks and he's coached receivers. So there's some versatility there. I think he's truthfully coached receivers more until he started coaching quarterbacks at UNLV. So there's some versatility there of what he can do positionally. And he also said, Mike said, and rightfully so, that the next, just because Alex is the offensive coordinator doesn't mean the new offensive coordinator has to be an offensive line coach.
And listen, the one thing with Brennan Marion, and I've watched UNLV games this year, the one thing is just because he runs that offense at UNLV doesn't mean he's going to run the same exact offense at Florida State. He's had to. UNLV is a program that's been terrible for a long time. He had to come up with something kind of different and be different than everybody else to get players to go there. And he's utilized the talents of those players. You'll see sometimes them have 3 backs. The wing, it looks like a triple option offense, and then they spread those guys out or put them in mode. He does a lot of eye candy and makes defensive coordinators defend the whole field. He's very creative. I like their offense. I told you the 2 guys, him and the offensive coordinator at Liberty, are 2 guys that do a lot with very little. I mean, they don't have a whole lot of talent at UNLV. Their quarterback can barely throw. They do a lot of stuff to get these guys to be productive. And I think that's important. They need somebody that's a little creative. I think Florida State got kind of stale this year. It'd be nice to have somebody that's a little innovative, go with Mike's ideas, because I think Mike's a very good play caller. But if you bring somebody in that's a little different, that could bring some new ideas, especially with athletes that the state of Florida produces, I think it could be a very good offense.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back and watch more of it. I've watched a couple of their games earlier in the year, but obviously he's a name that keeps getting a lot of run. And, obviously a young guy who, as you said, Fish is moving straight up the recruiting, the coaching totem pole. And of course he and Mike do have a pre-existing relationship. Mike was his receiver coach at Tulsa, I believe, if I can recall.
Yes, he was.
And he tells a story about how Mike used to meet him at 5 a.m. and get him up to go to class. I've heard the story. It was on ESPN before one of their games. But anyway, so there is a previous relationship there. And obviously I think the fact that, what you said about the conversation those 2 guys had at the Opryland Hotel, and the fact that they seem to get along, I think that would make the transition as seamless as possible. He already knows what kind of guy he's going to be working for with Mike too, because he's played for him, and I would imagine that Mike might have even settled down a little bit since his young days as a coach back in his late 20s as an assistant coach too. So that would be a great name. Who are some other names you guys think we need to keep our eye on offensively as far as the offensive coordinator is concerned?
I think Tino Sinceri is a name that I think is going to pop up. He's the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach at Indiana right now. He was a guy that coached at James Madison. He was a GA at Florida State for Jimbo Fisher. He's continued to move up the coaching channel, and I think he'd be a very good fit. He's just
Where
like
did he play ball at?
He played at Pitt for, I believe he played for Mike Norvell. I think he played for Mike Norvell at Pitt. So there's possibly a connection there. Kurt talked about it, a very young guy. He used to run the camps at the end for Jimbo, and you would see him running around and very hyperactive. I think kids would enjoy playing for him. I think he'd be a great hire. Some of the other guys that are on that list, who did you guys want to talk about? So.
Yeah, I have not. I've seen some of the list. Bob's in the actual file right now, so I can't go through the whole list.
I think it'll be on the site tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll have it on the site tomorrow. But
so
yeah,
Fish, is he as hyperactive as Dilly?
Yeah, very similar. And just he's one of these guys. He reminds me of one of the guys that I wanted Florida State to hire for a long time, and you knew him. He reminds me of a young Demo. Very, very aggressive coach. Very likable by recruits. I think that he comes from a football family. His father was a D-line coach at Florida State, coached a long time. Hey, he has it. You go look. The resume is impressive. He's coached under Jimbo. He's coached under Saban. He's coached under Cignetti. He checks a lot of the boxes. Young, can recruit. Listen.
You said his dad was the defensive line coach at Florida State?
Yeah, under Jimbo. Sal Sinceri was his dad.
Oh, Sal Sinceri.
Okay, yeah. He was a GA at Florida State. Tino was a GA the final year at Florida State before Jimbo left. But very impressive, and he's the lead recruiter right now for Julian Lewis, Juju from Georgia, who's like one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the country. And Indiana actually has a shot at flipping him from USC. So if he could flip somebody to Indiana from USC when that coach Riley has a history of quarterbacks, that tells you something about him as a recruiter. The guy can flat out recruit too. So
yeah, I read today where it looks like that kid's going to flip to Colorado actually.
Yeah.
But yes, that's quite to get that kid seriously interested in Indiana says a lot, and obviously he has a football pedigree. Now I don't know if he's going to be considered for coordinator or not, but another name to keep eye on offensively will be his last offensive coordinator at Memphis, Kevin Johns, who did not come with him, but was Elko's offensive coordinator last year at Duke and is at Oklahoma running the offense this year. He was not initially the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma this season, but was promoted to quarterbacks coach and co-offensive coordinator when they fired the offensive coordinator about 4 or 5 weeks ago. So Kevin would be a guy. I went through some guys today that have coached for Mike in the past, and so we'll have those names out tomorrow. Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. I think it's going to be interesting to see how what kind of control Mike gives up. We've talked about that. How does that impact who he gets at the offensive coordinator role? And then, of course, if he does get a guy like the guy from UNLV, then I think the next big hire is your offensive line coach, who's going to replace Alex. And we can start to speculate about that as we get further into this thing and know exactly because, some of these hires, as Jerry said in the beginning of the show, some of these hires at position coaches are going to be impacted by what position the DC is going to coach. Is he a walk-in boss, or is he coaching a position? Adam was kind of a he halfway coached the safeties, but he'd walk some too. And then obviously I think the OC will be a position coach because Mike is your walking boss with the offense. So and you don't want to, you've got an extra extra coach on offense with Mike obviously running his offense. So I think that's going to be interesting to see.
I've had a couple of people ask me about the chance that Ryan Silverfield rejoins, Mike.
Yeah, that's what Fish and I were arguing about yesterday. I just don't see him leaving a head coaching job. He's winning right now. He's got a better chance to get a bigger job as a head coach, being a head coach, than he does as a coordinator. He's winning. FedEx just put a bunch of money into that program. I don't see a guy at his age, he is still young, giving up the opportunity to come leave that program where he's got more stability than he does if he comes here and could be without a job in 2 years. So
that's an interesting point now. And I'm not picking a side between you and Fish. This is not getting involved in a marital dispute. But here's the thing: is one thing, and it really, this is a pretty serious point. Norvell has a major contract. This year it's 63. Some people think, oh, we can get rid of him next year at 55, or the next year at 47. And I think as bad as that feels to some people, that is a selling point when you're trying to go get a coordinator. I've got stability. Yep. I've got a solid contract. Yep. And it's a solid point when you're recruiting. Yep. He ain't going nowhere.
I don't believe he's going anywhere either. And
all right, well, Silverfield's going to make 2.2 this year, 2.25 next year, 2.5 2026.
And what did Adkins make?
Not that.
No, 1.3, 1.4 the next 2 years. Right. He was going to make 2.7 total over the next 2 years.
So he's going to give up $10 million over guaranteed $10 million to come be an offensive coordinator. I mean, sometimes
he's probably going to get a raise.
All you got to do is do.
It's unlikely.
It's possible a phone call was made and that nothing's going to come of it.
You guys do realize before this season he was on the hot seat going into the season, and they just happened to have a good year. So if he hadn't had a good season, he could have got fired at Memphis. Listen, guys have done this. This is the new thing. The head coach that was at Kent State took a drop down and took a coordinator job with Colorado. And now he's at San Diego State. Monken, who was the his offensive coordinator with the Ravens, he had the head coaching job somewhere else and took a drop down. Chip Kelly did it. Maybe he doesn't you don't know. You could sit there and go, well, hey, he has a head coaching job at Memphis. If Mike doesn't do well, maybe somebody doesn't go back to Memphis and take him. Maybe he stays there. He's stuck there until he finally gets fired. You don't know. He may think, oh, I could go to Florida State. I turn this around. I could get a group
Florida State's in a position where they could pay him.
Send me a text when it happens, please. Send me a text when it happens.
Yeah. You also told me that that we weren't going to hire coaches. They're not going to fire coaches 2 weeks ago into the season because Mike's not going to do that, and we're sitting here. So it does happen. It does happen. I'm
just telling you, that's not going to happen. I mean, you can sit here and talk about it and all that, but that's not. It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense for that guy financially. Guys,
what if they offer him 2.5?
Yeah.
All right, listen, y'all go ahead and live in whatever world you want to live in, but that's fine. I'm not
gotten involved in a marital dispute here.
I'm not going to sit here.
You jumped in with both feet too, Jerry.
This he would give up a guaranteed $14 million. That doesn't make any sense.
The good thing is there were some good names we talked about hiring. It doesn't seem like he's the first option. It doesn't seem like he.
Well, I don't mean him. And I don't
maybe Kyle Shanahan will get tired of coaching the 49ers. He just want to be a college offensive coordinator.
Now you're being silly. All right, there's a big difference.
Let me engage Sal in this. If I'm Mike and I got to hire an offensive coordinator, I'd a lot rather hire an offensive line coach because all wars are won in the trench.
As a coordinator?
I mean, what I mean is I want to get me the best offensive line coach I can find.
Oh, yeah.
And if that means making him my offensive coordinator, so be it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm not a fan of having an offensive line coach as an offensive coordinator, personally. I want that guy to take care of those 5 guys at that position it's a team within the team. It's managing 20 guys and developing all those
That's
guys.
a good point. It's a good point. Keep going.
Yeah, no, it's I want my coordinator play caller. I want him to be I want him to be intimately involved in everything else. As an offensive line coach, stay out of my business, right? Tell me what we're gonna do a running game. We're gonna coordinate protection. You say these are the runs I like. These are the formations I like runs in, and you can call those. And then you have that communication during the week. But I just, as an offensive line coach, and some guys that are ambitious want to do that, and they have done it. I'm not saying that, but I think most really good offensive line coaches, that's how they see themselves. We call ourselves the Mushroom Society, right? You know why we call ourselves that? There's a clinic called the Mushroom Society Clinic, right? It's because we're constantly kept in the dark and fed a lot of shit. So that's the way we like it, right? That's the way we like it, and
Yeah, you played for one.
What's that? Wayne was the offense coordinator,
And before him,
but Bobby called all the plays.
Sure.
Right.
I'm not saying play caller.
Yeah, well,
called the plays.
I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm saying if it's me personally, as an ex-offensive line coach, I just like being that guy, and it doesn't, just being comfortable, having the receivers and the quarterbacks, coaches, more comfortable with the pass because they're working it during practice. What are you doing as an offensive line coach?
Weren't you frustrated by an offensive coordinator at South Carolina, quarterback coach?
Yes, but that's neither here nor there. But here's
that was more personality driven, and
right.
The first one was great, and if Ricky Bussell had been retained at South Carolina, that the history of what happened to us is probably a little bit. It would have ended at some point, but probably not as quickly as it did. Now, when you bring in John Reeves, who was just, that one never made sense. But anyway.
But my point is, during practice, during the week, where's the quarterbacks coach and the receiver coach and the running back coach, they're together all week. Offensive line coach, they're off in their own little corner, right? They have their own little corner where they practice. As an offensive line coach, if I'm the coordinator, I'm coaching the line, I'm always going to be peeking to see how practice is going during Pascal or Dallas drill, or one-on-ones. What's going on? How are they doing? How's the quarterbacks? How are they looking? What are the little tweaks going? And I know they film everything. You can go back and watch the film, but my attention during those individual periods and those breakout periods are totally on the offensive line. Meanwhile, the quarterbacks and the receivers and the backs, they're together all practice. And so to me, I just,
that's good input.
Yeah.
The only thing, Mark, is flip the script. Let's make you the offensive coordinator. You're totally dependent on that offensive line coach.
100%. It is the most. Look, there's no secret. We win what 4 or 5 more games, maybe, irrespective of the defense play. Everybody plays better if the offensive line plays better.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You
win
can't
the running game. The
evaluate
quarterbacks
this
are protected. The defense stays off the field. All those things happen, right? And it is the most important position group on the field. There's no doubt.
If I was the head coach, if I was Mike, and I had to replace my offensive line coach, that would be priority number 1 for me. Who's the best guy out there? How do I get him?
100%. If you're smart, and Mike's pretty smart, he'll be a good guy.
Hey, Lincoln Riley might be available soon.
And honestly, that might be the one position Mike, I don't want to say can't coach, but probably feels the least confident in coaching. He's good with quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, but that man's got to know his limitations.
That's everybody. I mean, you put me out there with wide receivers, I probably wouldn't do very well. But I'll do good with and tight ends.
They'd block well.
Well, yeah, I could probably get tight end and run around. But yeah. But yeah, it's the most important position. Our ills can be, tracked back really to that one position group. And the thing I think that made it bad for Alex was that they regressed. I mean, since the beginning of the year, it just didn't look good. And they were better last year. They had made progression up to that point, but then you go into this year, they totally. I mean, Darius Washington. I mean, heck, he was preseason all conference.
Yeah,
they're pumping him for other honors, right? I mean,
Mike talked about he could be an All-American,
right? And probably deserved. I mean, he played a lot of position on the field. He's an athletic guy. I mean, but he's totally regressed. Maurice Smith has totally regressed.
Hey, listen, it's the first time I've ever seen two guys on one side miss blocks at the same time. That was just terrible.
Yeah.
But think about this. Those guys, they're in their 6th year of college football playing. That's new. In my day, a guy played 4 years. In your day, a guy might play 4 out of 5 years. With the COVID thing, they're in their 6th year.
There's a guy might be in his 9th year.
Oh, who might be coming back for 10? Cam Rising might be getting 9 or 10, right? What a year is Cam Rising on? And
that's all that stuff is ridiculous. You got 5 years to play football. Go ahead and move on with your life.
But think about how burned out you could be.
Yes.
At this point.
Yes.
Well, and the thing I'll always talk about Darius and Rob Scott and Maurice, they all had to play earlier in their careers. They all got hurt because they played early in their careers, and those injuries have kind of, I think, lingered through a lot of their careers and affected them. Alex talked earlier this year about Maurice deals with chronic back pain because of an injury he picked up from having to play when maybe he wasn't physically ready. And so you think that –
And those dudes aren't picking up big NIL paychecks either.
All right, Fish, we'll miss you.
Take it easy, man.
Yeah,
I got to check out, man. Take it easy.
See you, Fish. Yeah. I mean, those. I feel bad for those guys because I look, they're part of the offensive line brotherhood at Florida State, and I love them because of that. And I hated seeing what I was seeing, not because of the result, because I know how that hurts. Their pride hurts, and I know they want to do a good job, they want to do better, and and they deserve better, quite frankly. I mean, like Kurt said, I mean they brought us through some dark times, and in a time when that position was the worst in college football at the time. And, we were all excited when they started playing better and we started having some production, and guys, we weren't having to just bust all over the place, and so, I appreciate the effort those guys put in, but the truth of the matter is that they have regressed this year. They don't look near the same guy they were even last year.
No.
Well, wouldn't you even agree? I think 2022 was probably the peak.
That was
I think last year they took a bit of a step back, and this year has been even a much bigger step back.
And I wonder how much of that is our expectations.
Maybe.
In 22 we were surprised. It was wonderful. But then in 23 we expected more out of that offensive line. And
listen, and I don't want to
always think about that 2022 Miami game where they just ran that counter play over and over again on Miami. And
that was a scheme thing.
Awesome.
That was a scheme thing. They never adjusted the scheme. That was on Miami.
And listen,
what do you say?
I was going to say, I don't want to keep on. These guys have paid the price for what happened this year. And I don't want to keep on throwing dirt on them. But listen, you and I, Mark, when they got nominated for the behind closed doors, we never talked about it on Seminole Sidelines last year. But I remember when last year's offensive line got nominated for the Joe Moore Award, you and I were both mortified. Behind the door, we said there's no way. We saw but you can't. You're winning every single game you play, so it's hard to come up with a rational argument for, hey, this offensive line's playing bad. Oh, by the way, you're scoring 38 points a game and you're scoring it on 4 and 5 possessions in a row at times. I mean, but yeah, we talked about that last year off the record. That wow, really, Joe Moore Award. We did not see that from that offensive line last year, and so I agree with what Kurt just said. Peak was 2022, and it's been a slow. But anyway, I mean, listen.
And look, there's all kinds of extenuating circumstances that are the reason why, and so but I think one of the bigger problems has been the lack of development for some of the younger guys. I mean, I mean, we always talk about Armilla, but I don't know the situation is. I don't know why he has or hasn't played.
I'm glad you brought that up after Fish left the building.
Right. Yeah, me too. But even like Otto or Jalen Early, those guys are third-year players. You would hope they were further along, but the truth is they're not. And I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why.
Two.
Otto's two, but Early's three though, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Early's three. Armella's three. Lucas Simmons is two.
Yeah. And
Otto.
I mean, look, that offensive line, we won the championship. I know days are different. I keep bringing this up, but I mean, Clay Shiver, Lewis Tyre, Juan Laureano, those guys were third-year sophomores. And they started on a national championship winning teams. Not saying that I know what I'm doing or anything like that, but I'm saying is, you start off with a high bar, you bring in elite talent, and they can, and then grow them from there. That's the idea. If you're bringing in guys that are projects and you're having to play them, are you inhibiting their development? It goes back to recruiting again. Are we bringing in projects all the time that we have to develop? We have to develop, right? And so, I mean, there's a multitude of reasons why it happened, and like it or not, the coaches are responsible for it. The players are too, and it's just. It's just got to get turned around, and it starts with bringing in a higher caliber player, and then developing them from there.
Yeah, listen, I guess the one thing I was shocked about Armella was as bad as this offensive line was, and you're throwing everybody else in there to see if they can do something. Why would you not? And I don't know.
There must be something.
I don't know if it was a personal thing. I don't know if it was personalities. I mean, listen, there's players and coaches that don't get along at times, and you can't tell me it does not have an impact on how that relationship. Yeah, and so I wonder. I mean,
I actually said that to a coach. I mean, I said it to Mark the other day. If you have a kid that, and I'm not saying this about Armella, I'm just saying, you recruited the kid, you signed him, you got him, and the kid not going to class. He's showing up late to team meetings. He's got penalty after penalty and scrimmages. You're going to have a personality conflict at some point.
Yeah, no, that's true. It happens.
Yeah,
it happens. And I just threw that name out there because there's a guy that's been here 4 years.
Yeah, well, him and SD's both, guys that did not get a chance to play a whole lot, and you keep on throwing some of these other guys in there each and every game that have proven time and play again that they can't play. And maybe one of those guys is a gamer, for lack of a better term. I mean, why were you? I would have put him in and see. Listen, yeah, he does get penalties in practice, but I will give him this: he's one of the guys that he'll fight, and that's one of the things we did not see out of this offensive line this year. We didn't see a lot of fight. And the season still got 2 games to go. I keep on forgetting that. I keep on thinking the season's over because of the coaching changes have started. I think that's one thing that stood out to me. You're struggling so bad. You're awful, worst offensive line in college football, and you've got a guy that was a 5-star prospect and coming out of high school, and you can't even get him on the field to play some garbage time snaps when you're getting beat. Like I don't even think he played against Notre Dame Saturday night. I mean, they were playing everybody by the end of that game. I'll have to go back and watch it again. But I
don't want to, because I don't know what the issue is with Armella.
Yeah.
But if you got a kid who's not doing what you're asking him to do, why would you reward him with playing time?
Well, he does. I guess he seems to love being a part of this football team. So
he does.
I can't
That's
imagine.
What's so amazing.
I can't imagine that they're having a lot of issues with him off the field. I mean, I can't.
Yeah,
I don't know, but
he didn't say issues.
We're not saying issues.
No, I'm just saying I can't imagine it's an off the field.
He's that guy that's waving the flag and running out next to Mike, and he seems very engaged. It's a mystery, and at some point we'll find out what it is.
Yeah, someday.
Yeah, when he transfers out of here and tells us.
Oh, I promise you, had this Adkins move not have happened, he's probably out of here. Maybe with Adkins staying, if he hasn't burned other bridges, he'll stay with Adkins leaving.
The portal's going to be interesting. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. I mean, we said a week ago, Pat, that there were going to be a lot of kids in the portal.
Yep. Well,
prior to the coaching changes, will there be more or less?
I think some of it will. I think there's a reason Mike wants there to be some decisions made by December 1st or December 7th, so that he knows some of these kids know who they're playing for or could be playing for if they jump in the portal. So I think to the degree that he can, he will probably make as many of these hires by December 7th as he can. And then, he maybe even make some announcements if he can't have them here. Hey, so-and-so is going to take the offensive line job or the tight ends job, but they won't be here until X team is out of the playoffs. Or if that's, I'm just saying that's obviously a hypothetical scenario. But I do think
to your earlier point, I think these conversations started 6 weeks ago, and he may be closer to knowing who those guys are.
Yeah, I do think. I think he's. You guys go back. I think one of you talked about the list that he's had since he was a coordinator. Yeah. Mike's. I know talking to Shane, and Shane, he really enjoyed his time working for Mike because Mike is forward thinking and is a very organized guy and has a plan for each and everything to a T. I mean, he says there's not an I that's not dotted and a T that's not crossed, and so I think that Mark is right, and I think that I think the fact that he pulled the trigger when he did this weekend lets you know that he's ahead of the process, and I think he does have a timeline, and I think that even he mentioned today, this is the first year that they've had to operate with this calendar. The calendar continues to change.
And to your point, Pat, what Shane said is exactly what Michael Alford says. And that's the difference between keeping Mike and firing Willie.
Yeah.
Because Willie wasn't that guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I always go back to the thing that I think it was Bruce Warwick said that, Mike's one of the few head coaches he's ever been around that actually does the calendar for the year himself. He does not pass this off to his football ops guy or his executive assistant. He's actually got the calendar out, and I'm sure it's on a computer. And he's actually, I had to walk into Skip Holtz's all the time. And Skip was always on that computer with the calendar or with the depth chart, and with the recruiting board, one of the three. And so I do think that hopefully for his own sake, because I know he wants to get these guys in here as quick as he can, bring some new energy into this program. And I think if he can do it before the portal opens, it offers Florida State a big advantage.
Hey, Salva, you're getting kind of thin on the top.
Yeah.
I think he was about to fall asleep over there. No, we have been on for an hour and a half, guys. Y'all want to wrap it up or keep on going?
Pretty much a record.
That is a record.
What haven't we talked about?
The receiver coaches. You want to talk about the election?
The receiver coach.
Yeah, I think that's all going to be impacted by who the offensive coordinator is.
Absolutely, that's what I think.
Yeah, I think
because Mike knows receivers, and
I know. About 2 years ago, he was considering possibly making a change there. I know one of the guys he was talking to was Phil McGagan, who ended up at Colorado. I don't think Phil ever came in for an interview, but I worked with Phil at USF, and I do remember him calling me and saying, hey, what do you think about the program? What do you think about Mike? Yada, yada, yada. And then, of course, it never came to fruition. So that could be a guy that Mike could circle back to since he was interested in. But I believe Phil is coaching for the Broncos now, and I don't think Phil would leave the NFL for a college job.
So let me ask you this. So moving forward, I assume the wide receiver GA, maybe Stockstill, will handle receivers.
Yeah, he said Guy Lamorne, or however you pronounce his last name, and Stock would kind of trade it off or work together.
Yeah, he said Stock could help at a couple of different positions, is what he said in the press conference.
I imagine Chris Thompson and Gabe would handle the line.
Yeah. Yep. There's nothing very clear been officially announced there, but I think informally that's the case.
Yeah, he mentioned Guy and Rick with the receivers today, and also mentioned that Rick could kind of help oversee all the position groups, really, is what he said.
Yeah. And who's going on the road? I imagine Rick could go on the road.
He was a hell of a recruiter.
Yes, he is. I throw him in Jacksonville right now.
Exactly. You remember the Brad Scott, Rick Stockstill battle over Edgar Bennett and
Yes.
Chris Parker?
100%.
Yeah.
I remember playing against Chris.
He knows how to
For whom the bell tolls.
Yeah, it tolls for thee.
Y'all doing a recruiting show tomorrow, Pat? I feel like that's the only other thing we can get into, but we might want to leave that.
Yeah, we'll leave that because we need to let Nick. Nick needs. Nick's done a lot of work, and I want to save that for him. And I just put up a story on Solomon Thomas and the offensive line reactions. We'll see, but we will talk. We will talk about that tomorrow. I will say this: it's hard to read whether Solomon is. He was definitely said, not going to lie, he was not happy that they fired Atkins, but he also understands it's a business and he wants to keep it business. So we'll see how that plays out. The other two guys, Mario Nash Jr. and Peyton Joseph, they seem like they're locked in for now. Mario Nash Jr. used the term, I'm committed for now. And obviously, I think Peyton Joseph is locked in, and Daniel Pierre-Louis has not made a comment, has not returned any message request for a comment. So we'll see what he says if I can get in touch with him before 3:00 tomorrow.
I think he tweeted something.
Yeah, I didn't. I went to his Twitter account, and he had not at that time had not done anything.
It was right before our show. He just said, "Treated me like I was his family. Wish nothing but luck and success for Coach Atkins and his family." 2 spear emojis. So that feels like he's not holding it against Florida State, but appreciates Alex.
Yeah, I think all these guys are starting to realize that this what kind of business this is. Like I said when all this started with the NIL and the portal, that these kids were going to have to learn to grow up much faster than they wanted to, and they are finding out that this is indeed a business, and because they are making part of the reason they're picking their schools or business decisions. It's not all football decisions, but yeah, I think. Like I said earlier, I think kids are more resilient than we give them credit for, and I think that this could be a case where Solomon is upset for a couple of days, and by the end of this weekend, and he's talked to Mike several times, and Mike's given him the plan, and I think this got a chance to work itself out.
So let me make an argument here. I said this earlier, that to me, recruiting, while important at every position, is less important as among your offensive and defensive coordinator. I would argue that Atkins was one of the best recruiters on this staff.
Maybe you can make the case.
But if you can't block them, it don't matter. I mean, your offensive line coach better be a damn good offensive line coach. And, so I'm just saying that there's 4 kids that would have made a great offensive line unit, but you got to break some eggs to make an omelet.
Yeah, I think obviously the lack of development in the high school offensive line prospects, I think, was another thing that went into this.
Exactly. Signed some good kids in the past, but
so what areas do these guys recruit?
It's similar to what y'all did. Yeah, they have different areas.
Yeah, I know they did. So
and the best I can tell, Pat, and you would know better than me, but I think they have the same sort of a formula where you recruit your area, and then the position coach has to approve the kid, and ultimately Mike has to approve it.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's much different than the Bowden era.
Like Alex was big. He did a lot of Atlanta recruiting for sure. I think, I know they've probably all got a small section of Florida, but yeah, I think the position coaches got involved a lot after the offer was extended. I think it was kind of transitioned from the recruiting coach to the position coach, and I don't know if they had. I think Tokarz was in Jacksonville, and Adam was in Tampa, and Dugans was in Miami. I want to say that maybe Alex had the Orlando area. I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but he spent a lot of time in the Atlanta area for sure. But yeah.
So lay it out for the listener that doesn't know the background. You assign position coaches to geographic areas, and so they'll recruit all positions in their geographic area.
Yeah.
If they got a wide receiver, they're going to get with the wide receiver coach before an offer would be extended.
Yeah, typically it goes from recruiting coach to position coach to coordinator to head coach. And so it varies from staff to staff. Some of them are more, South Florida, Skip made every position coach was responsible for his own position as long as it was just between the position coach and Skip. The coordinator might have some say-so if you want to get up on the table and argue hard enough. But then I know when at South Carolina, Mark, it was position coach, recruiting coach, position coach, coordinator, Brad. And I think that's the way it is at Florida State. So at Florida State, it's going to take the coordinator to approve, then Mike's going to have to approve. And, of course, the caveat is Mike can outright all of them. He's got 4 votes. They've got 3. So,
but hey, let's talk about this. If I'm the receiver coach, I guess I can go anywhere in the country and look for a receiver, but that isn't how it really works. I recruit. No,
it's not possible.
No, they're going to recruit an area, and then
going to recruit your area.
Yeah,
because you're looking at all classes. You're looking at kids coming up. You're looking at freshmen, sophomores. You have your list, and you're working that area, that school. That's why Coach Bowden made every position coach hit every school in Florida. Even if a school didn't have a prospect, Coach Bowden would go down to roll call. It'd be preseason and go through every school in the state of Florida and ask that area coach if he had set foot in that school. And because you never know when that school's going to have a kid.
And that happened at Miami Christian when Andre Wadsworth showed up one day, a transfer out of the Bahamas.
Yeah. There's any number of stories like that.
And said, "Hey, I got one finally."
Yeah, guys, y'all can keep going. I need to go eat dinner. I was not factoring in 2 hours here. I haven't eaten. It's putting 8 o'clock. Yeah. So
we're done. We're done.
All right. Well, listen.
We'll giving people a lot.
Yeah, we will be back tomorrow to talk recruiting at 3 o'clock. We got the defensive coordinator hot board. Let me slow down and say that. We have the defensive coordinator hot board up at theosceola.com. We got Mike's press conference, thoughts on it. Jerry's got his column on why the changes were made, when they were made. He and Bob put together a column yesterday. That's at theosceola.com. I've got the offensive line story on the reaction we got from everyone but Danielle Pierre-Louis, and that's up on the site too. We'll have the offensive coordinator hot board probably up tomorrow. Bob is working on that right now, but please go to theosceola.com and check us out. Hit the subscribe button on your Osceola YouTube channel to subscribe and sign up for notifications so that you know when we are doing this live or even taped. But we will be back at 3 tomorrow with Nick and possibly Fish to talk in depth about recruiting and what we've heard from these prospects over the last 24 hours since Mike made the changes. And please go to theosceola.com, and we'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. And then I think we're going to have Link Jarrett later in the week. Is that right, Kurt?
Yeah, I think we're talking to him Thursday. Going to run it either Thursday or Friday.
Yep. So we'll
go 42.
What's that?
I do not think he'll get 2 hours with Link Jarrett. I do not think he has 2 hours to give us.
All right, guys. We appreciate everybody listening, watching, and we're going to let Mark sign us off as always.
Go Noles.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.